Call our meeting to order of our Putnam County Board of Commissioners Health Insurance Committee meeting 1:30. Invocation, Commissioner Goddard, would you take care of that?
I will.
And Commissioner Pickens, will you do the pledge?
All right. Y'all bow your heads with me. Lord, thank you so much for this time that we get to share together, Lord. Just all we can do is give you thanks for all the wonderful things that you give to our county. We just ask that you give us the wisdom to make wise choices, Lord. And we just thank you for the hedge of protection that's around our families that live in our town, Lord. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Commissioner Goddard, Commissioner Pickens. In front of you is our agenda for the day. I'm going to do something a little different. We're going to move item 4 up to number 2 and item 2 to number 4. So the first item of discussion is, this committee was quite large the last time we were meeting to go over some things. And I think that this committee should recommend back to the Board of County Commissioners either a steering committee or a lesser committee to kind of deal with the day-to-day activities. So I'll just start that conversation and see who else has anything. The old insurance committee, and Marjorie gave this to me, was, I guess this is part of our current structure, yeah, is one commissioner, the county administrator, the sheriff, the clerk of courts, tax collector, property appraiser, supervisor election, and HR director. We don't have to go that way. We can recommend anything to the Board of County Commissioners, but I'd like to get some input from the committee on how they feel.
We'll just start at one end and work.
Yeah, go right ahead. Start, Bob, if you're ready.
A smaller committee certainly makes things a little bit more workable. I'd be in favor of a smaller committee of some kind.
What about what I read? Does that not fit?
Representation of that, I would like to see something other than the HR director and the county administrator in there. I think some more lower level people actually in the trenches who
Okay.
talk to employees, who know what we're looking for. I actually have a list that we took away from the department head meeting today of what we're kind of looking for
Okay.
as department heads.
Why don't you go ahead and share that if you're able to?
Two things really. If we're going to do self-insurance, we certainly would like to find a lower deductible. We'd like to get a clinic out of it, and the farm. We'd like to get more insurance for less money. In other words, be able to hold the line on what we pay right now and get better insurance out of self-insurance, if that's the way we go.
Okay. What else would you recommend, though? You wanted to have other than the list I read off. What would you like to see on there?
Well, I think to keep the constitutionals involved, they would need
Okay.
to be there.
County administrator would almost have to be by default, wouldn't you think?
Or he could designate someone.
Okay.
County administrator's not on it now.
By our,
By the old
By the old one.
They were.
But not
Not
this
the
one.
current
Not the
one.
current one.
Oops, I just hit the button.
I thought you were going over.
He's my height.
Yeah, I'm buddy type now.
I do have communication from Stacy about if you do form a subcommittee. He's got a little blurb, but I'll wait until y'all are done.
Well, again, nothing's going to happen today. What we're going to do is recommend to the Board of County Commissioners that this is the insurance committee's ideas that they would like to look at, because the committee can't do that on their own. So Bob, I think we were talking county administrator, but that's not or designee?
Yeah, I would think.
Or designee, okay. And who else would you like to see on there?
I like the idea that we have some representation from staff here.
Okay.
The fact that we have Press and Mike here, it gives us a little bit more of what the actual workers in the trench are looking at. what we bring to it is what our guys are, what are the issues? I don't know if that gets all the way up to the county administrator or not.
I hear you. So the people that report directly to you, that's what you're hearing from. Okay. All right. Is that all? Good. Press, how about you?
Well, we had this conversation this afternoon, and I agree, probably a smaller committee could work. We had a lot of people in other committees, but I do think that Public Works should be on the committee and the Sheriff's Department, because we represent the highest number of employees in the county. We have a more vested interest than any other department, basically. And I think we need to, and I agree with Bob, we need to have more department heads in this thing, because we're the ones that have to live with it every day. We hear the complaints, we hear what's not covered, what's covered, what the real problems we run into. And I think that's a valuable asset we need on the committee.
Right. Well, I think between you and the Sheriff's Department, y'all make up the most of the employees on the health insurance.
We
Is
do.
that correct?
Absolutely.
All right. Mike, what about you?
Probably just reiterate what you've heard already. I think the department head level, some type of representation from the department head level would be good, for the reasons spoken already. There's not much more to add. I think the constitutional officers are a given, I believe, and then probably, I would think the county administrator would be on there. But then maybe in addition, somebody that would represent, like we've heard from Press and Bob, somebody that hears it every day from the staff and knows what issues that they're facing with
Right.
health insurance.
Okay.
Well,
Green?
I think the constitutional officer should be on there and the county administrator, but from just listening to talking, I don't really think this is turning into a subcommittee. If we put department heads and all on this, instead of
Yeah.
making the committee smaller, we're actually increasing the committee. So
Let's get,
I really don't know if this is creating a subcommittee or not. When you put all department heads in there,
Well, we're
there's
not
more on the
talking,
I
committee
don't-
than we have now.
Yeah.
we're not talking about all department
Yeah, I
heads.
don't think
mean,
that was, the intent was all of department heads. Just having, even if you had one or two, they could represent.
And that's what I was getting at. I mean, Public Works and Sheriff's Department, we have the most employees. I mean, Parks and Rec, I mean, Bob, you've got what, 4 employees, 5 employees? 21, so. But, I'm getting at, I mean, I have about 80-some employees. Sheriff's Department's got, what, over 200?
267.
Yeah. I think we definitely need to be represented. I agree, I don't think we need every department head on there.
right. Well, I agree, then we'd be back where
We're
we
back
were.
where we're starting.
Or some way of representing, how we have a voice in it somehow. However that happens.
Commissioner Pickens?
Could you have, the broad committee that we have, and they select a certain group, like 4 or 5, to actually, meet with the different groups and bring the information back to them? And then the whole committee would make a recommendation back to the county commissioners?
Yeah.
And then I question, are we gonna make a decision today?
No, the
Because I
board,
question the absence of a county commissioner. And also, hopefully, in a few weeks, we will have the 5th county commissioner appointed. And in less than a month, we will have a county administrator to talk to. So, hopefully we won't make a decision here today. We just have discussion, but, so that's where I feel if you could have the whole group and then maybe select just the subcommittee to actually do the research and bring it back to, the full committee.
yeah, I agree. We're not making decisions, we're just gonna make a recommendation.
Okay.
So that's fine. Start, Mr. Davis, over to my far right.
I think a steering committee would work. I think you have to be careful with that because you have some people who have a greater knowledge, a deeper knowledge of this subject matter. And then you have those who you would potentially appoint to a steering committee who may or may not have the knowledge. So you can end up, this committee has met numerous times over the past 8 months or so. So we have a deeper knowledge than you would typically find if you were to bring someone new into this process. They could get caught up, but ultimately, I think you need to maybe not steer it as much to department heads, but people who have some knowledge of of insurance, of maybe financial matters that could help speed that process forward. But a steering committee, I think, would work. I mean, this is a large body to get in one place to begin with, and secondarily to move, to do things. It's just, everybody's at a different level, right? Because you have so many people involved. If you had, if you get your best and your brightest out front to drive it, to steer it,
Right.
then they can come back and kind of bring other people up to speed on it. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Mr. Overtur?
I sort of agree with Commissioner Pickens. It sounds like if you're going to leave the constitutionals on there, my suggestion would be maybe, as Mr. Parker did, to bring in somebody like Mr. Davis, who has a huge amount of knowledge, and maybe some of us don't. Maybe that would be where, as Press said, where you've got your working people, that maybe some of them, that you would appoint them,
Right.
just to, again, they're dealing with it more than we are, and you're hearing it as they said. But, that might be a way, but if not, you're going to have just as many, if not more, because I'm sure some of the union people and some of the others that we had represented here, are going to feel left out, and we sure don't want to do that. So to me, it's a little bit harder to have a smaller committee if all of us are still included and we add to it. But maybe we can do as Clay just said, maybe we can do it where you specialize, 4 or 5 people, and then make the recommendation to help the rest of us. So just a thought.
Ms. Bridges?
I definitely think a smaller committee would be able to focus a little bit better. I agree that all of the constitutional offices should be involved so that they have a heads up on what's coming down the pike. I agree with Bob's comments in making sure that all of the working status people in the county are represented, and the department heads meet on a regular basis. Maybe they vote or appoint a couple of department heads to represent, and then they can take that information back. So I think we're headed in the right direction by moving forward with the steering committee.
Commissioner Goddard?
Well, based on, I've heard everything here, it sounds like what I would think, each constitutional officer, each department, pick one person to represent them, and then we narrow that down to, say, 5 people that would become our steering committee.
Would we put a commissioner on there, or, you see, I'm not sure we need to be on that.
Right, I almost think it needs to be represented by the departments and the constitutional officers more than a commissioner.
Well, the reason I say that, at the end of the day, we're the ones that are gonna make that decision.
Correct.
So you're gonna the steering committee will bring something back to the full committee, and at the end of the day, it's gonna come back to us anyway, so.
I would think the county administrator would, being on the committee, would
Be representative.
be representative of you guys
Right.
being
Right.
on the
Right,
committee.
it'd be our filter on that, yeah, exactly. Ms. Papel, you had your microphone to you.
If you're interested, I can share how I've seen it done in other counties.
Please,
The constitutionals each send a representative.
okay,
The departments of the BOCC send a representative. The commissioners do not sit on the committee. Generally, HR, or whoever it is that deals with the insurance, brings the information, prepares the agenda, what have you. The meetings are in the sunshine. Which brings me to what Stacy sent me today. He said, if you do have a subcommittee, merely to gather facts for the committee, the large committee, there's not a sunshine requirement. But if the subcommittee makes any recommendation at all, or has any other duties delegated to them, the subcommittee also must meet in the sunshine.
Yeah,
So
I-
that takes care of the legal advice.
No, yeah, I get that. So I
It's
can,
unfortunate that we don't have clerk of courts represented here, which is also a chunk of employees.
right. Well, I think right now, I think the agreement that I'm hearing is we have a steering committee of a few people that are out fact-finding and then can bring it back to this full committee that we currently have in place right now. And we don't need to be changing that, in my opinion, right now. We're fine with that. Maybe as the months go by and our new administrator and things get different, then we can start. But I do think that with all the commissioners, 5 of us, I think that causes some issues for us. And I agree that we probably need to step away from that part of it. And I don't mind having if they want to be on the insurance committee, the big full one, but I do mind if they want to be on the steering, because I think that's where we get lost in the weeds. So I think the consensus is today to get an internal steering committee, a smaller committee that's a fact-finding committee that does not make a recommendation. Is everybody good with that?
If they have any other duties, including assisting in the wording of an RFP or anything like that, then they do have to meet in the sunshine.
Right, but this committee, from what I see, would just come back and say, here's some of the fact-finding that we found. Full committee, what do you want to do at that point? And that's where the full committee would be involved in it, right? That's how I look at it.
Up to y'all.
Is anybody else okay with that? Is everybody good with all that? All right, so how many people do we want on this? We know the constitutionals, right?
Correct.
Okay. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. County administrator 6. HR?
Do you want HR on the committee, or do you want HR as staff support to the committee?
I think HR should be staff support. to the
Because I
steering.
will also be staff support to the committee from the financial aspect, but I do not care to be on the committee, either one of them.
Okay.
So that would be a committee of 6.
So far.
So far.
But we still haven't really put a department head on there. And do we want to put 1 or 2?
Well, if the county administrator is gonna be on there, he can decide whether it's him or somebody else, but
I think I'd like to have him and,
pushing it to 7, we're getting to a big number again.
well, 7's a workable committee. I think if we get much more than that, then we're,
It's a committee that's not making a recommendation.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
are you talking about the steering committee, or are you talking about the overall committee?
the steering committee right now.
So we're just if we keep going, we're gonna be just as big as we were. I mean, again,
I think we're
To-
talking, right now, we're at 7.
yeah,
So
but I
7.
mean, you still haven't included press or?
Yeah, I
or-
just did.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
didn't. Okay.
a department head. And they can choose amongst themselves who they want. They could do that.
I vote for press.
Well, that,
Do,
but we're making,
I knew my friends. are.
Commissioner Harvey, do all 5 constitutionals want to be on the steering committee?
I don't know if they want to be, but they could send a representative. So I think we should offer that to them. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm sitting here just thinking again, if we're all still a part of the overall committee, we're still gonna have a say-so, and we're still gonna be up to speed on it. Do you not want your steering committee, a smaller group, to get the information and present to the committee?
But
I understand what you're doing, and I appreciate it, but I'm just,
who do we leave out? What constitutional do we leave out?
well, I don't know that,
Well, because Miss Brenda's shaking her head. Tax collector, I'm sure they want to be involved in that process.
The constitutional officers also meet on a regular basis. They could have that discussion amongst themselves and see if they want to reduce that. So we said we're not making a decision today.
Right.
So I think that's a good discussion for the constitutional officers at a meeting. And they may want to just select maybe two, or,
Right, that might be. I just don't know that we all need to be on
Yeah.
the smaller committee, because we're still a part of the overall
bigger
committee, and we'll have a say-so
Right.
in it. I'm just trying to make it a little simpler, maybe.
Well, in my opinion, I was thinking five. Five makes a good committee. And with that, we could decide, well, three will be from the constitutionals, two from the departments, or, it's just a thought.
So if we did that, let's say we had 3 constitutionals, 1 department head, and county administrator. That gives 5 for a steering committee.
Is that good
Let the
representation?
constitutionals decide who they
Yeah,
want.
I think 5 or 6 is a workable number.
Well, no, we're at 5 right
That's
now.
fine, okay.
Five's a good work.
We were at 6, but now we went back to 5.
Okay.
So,
Because you're still going to have HR and
yeah, you're still gonna have everybody
budget,
else.
staff
on the-
support, yeah.
Right.
I mean, the steering committee's still gonna report to the main committee with all the facts we find out, so it's not
Correct.
like anybody's gonna be left out in the dark.
All right, so let's bring this in for a landing. We're gonna recommend, this committee's gonna recommend to the BOCC that we form a steering committee for fact-finding only. It's gonna be 3 constitutionals, 1 department head, and the county administrator. Is that correct? Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we got consensus on that. Now we're going to ask for a chairman and a vice chairman of this committee, the full committee, okay? All right? So as the chairman, I will entertain motion to appoint a chairman and a vice chairman.
Can I ask a question now? The chairman nor the vice chairman has to be a commissioner,
No,
correct?
it does not
Okay.
have to be.
Well, then I'll nominate Clay Davis as the chairman.
Okay?
Second.
You nominate Clay as chairman?
Second.
Charles second, Mr. Overturf seconds it. Okay, any further discussion on Mr. Davis being chairman of the full committee?
I
Let me
think you
put
have
a-
to ask if there's any other nominations, too.
Okay, but let me put a little caveat. That's if Mr. Parker appoints you to, okay. So is there any other nominations for the chairmanship of the committee?
This is just for recommendation, is that correct? Or
That's it.
Are we making decisions?
No, we're just making a recommendation.
Which I agree, but,
No,
I
we're
didn't
not
think we
making
were making decisions.
No decision.
Okay.
Okay, so hearing none, then we're not going to vote. It's automatic that we'll send your name up to the board as, and that's as long as Mr. Parker approves. And he's part of the Constitution, well, no, that doesn't, yeah, okay. And now vice chairman. Chair will entertain motion for vice chairman. Actually, Mr. Davis, you should be running it now.
Not until the recommendation.
Okay, that's right, that's right. Okay, vice chairman recommendation.
I make a motion, Chairman, that Press be the vice chairman.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Good deal. Mr. Davis made a motion, Mr. Pickens seconded it for Press Tompkins to be vice chair. Is there any other nominations? I got it, didn't I? Any other nominations for
I was watching.
vice chairman? I'm a quick learner, okay, I got it. Hearing none, then we'll present that. So the 2 things we're going to present are the 5 steering committee and the chairman and the vice chairman of the full insurance committee. Next thing is discussing about self-insurance consultant discussion. That's on our agenda. The previous committee, if you remember, took a lot of testimony on self-insurance and how that possibly could benefit the county. Our Florida Blue partners suggested that that might be an avenue to look at into the future if reserves are adequate enough to handle the additional exposure that might exist. So this committee now needs to make a recommendation. Is it the thought of looking at going to find us a self-insurance consultant that can walk this process through? And that's going to be the topic of discussion.
That's something the subcommittee should at some point be working on? to
Well, I
determine-
think it's on our agenda and it's something that we're there at now. So we can go ahead and set that direction. I think that's a given. I mean, I hate to say
I
that.
think we will wind up with guidance somehow. Right?
Yeah, because we completely put it out there. Everybody knows that, and so of our provider has said that too. So it's not like we're not prepared to go in that direction. Now, whether we can go in that direction is a whole different story.
And that was the clarity I was going to ask for, is are we going to look for a consultant that will steer us down the right path, whether it be one or the other, or lead us to the time where it would be the most prudent thing to do?
So
Give us-
basically, yeah. No, I
Yeah,
hear you.
yeah.
And it very well might be this person says you're not ready for 4 years, or you should have
Or
been there
2
20 years
years,
ago.
or-
What's the
yeah.
problem? So this committee needs to make a recommendation. Do we want, let's just take the word self out. Right. Do we want to find a consultant that can look at our insurance situation? Is that what we're,
And lead us, steer us down the best path.
right? What that would pertain to is we would have to find someone who's qualified to be able to
And
get-
impartial.
I'm sorry?
Qualified and impartial.
Right.
But they would have to hold the designations and represent all the different avenues of that. So, okay. So we would have to,
Do an RFP.
we'd have to do an RFP, and that would have to come from Marjorie and HR, along with the county administrator, of how that RFP would look, and what the price, what we're trying to keep it in.
And of course, we need the guidance quickly because we need to know whether to put those funds in the budget.
You always have to bring that up.
That is our job.
I know, that's our job.
Cruel that way, aren't I?
Yeah, you are. You're pretty brutal when it comes to that. Well, I mean, the budget's so tight this year, that's a concern of mine, if we could even
I'm
possibly-
thinking something like this would be in the $30,000 range, not the $100,000
No, I
range.
hear you.
I could be high. I'm just absolutely, I'm wagging. I'm not even swagging. I'm just
You're wagging and not swagging?
wild apple guess,
Okay, okay.
rather than sophisticated wild apple
Okay.
guess.
There's a difference.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
One's sophisticated, one's not.
Yeah, and I'm totally, that's an unsophisticated number.
What, I mean,
I think
Monday-
to hire somebody to handle all of it for you once you make a decision, say you decide to go self-insurance. I think we found during the process this past 6 months or so that some of our sister counties are paying well in excess of $100,000 a year to whoever it is that guides them annually and makes their rates and, yeah.
Well, I think we need to be realistic, because we are in a very tight budget year, and we cannot afford to go give the farm away on this thing. And I don't even know if there's room in the budget that we could even slide this in. I mean, I hate to say that, but it's 30,000. I was thinking more 25 to 20,000, but that might just be really low, and we might not.
I could be low or I could be high.
But how
I'm
much work
being-
do we really need? Do we need a year's worth of work? Do we need 2 months' worth of work? Do we need?
Whoever it
5 months'
is will have to help us craft RFPs for whatever route we decide to take. Ann always teased me about using that northern word. Whatever direction we decide to take, whoever we hire ought to be able to help us write the best RFP possible, so that when we are making an insurance decision, we're evaluating apples and apples, that we've asked in the RFP, how did you craft your admin fee? Craft it with pharmacy rebates, craft it without pharmacy rebates.
Well, we learned a
Very
lot, yeah.
finite, well-detailed RFP, so that when we get something to look at, we're looking at apples and apples, and we know we are, and there's no confusion.
Chairman, if I may,
You may.
can we just put an RFP out there and see what the numbers come back at, and see if that would help us make a decision if
Well,
it's feasible?
we could, and Mr. Davis, you're right, but we've got a meeting coming up on Monday, one of our almost our final budget meeting, where we're gonna put pencil to paper and start adding and subtracting pretty
Monday
heavy
should be the last changes to
Yeah.
the budget.
before we go into our public hearings, so in September. And then at the end of September, we vote. So if there's a cost affected to this position, we got to know it by Monday.
We have to plug something
Gotta
in,
put something in
good,
the
bad,
bu-
or indifferent.
Right.
Couldn't you plug in a number that you could live with and then?
I
mean,
threw
what-
out
what do
30.
you-
And I'm in agreement.
30,000 seems kind of high to me, but, I mean, ultimately, isn't the decision just self-insured or not self-insured? I mean, that's why that's on there like that, because we fully insured, it's pretty easy, right? I mean, if we stick fully
Correct.
insured, then you just look for quotes and how can we hone and polish up the, the plans as they come to us. But ultimately, if it's self-insured, we need someone, we kept hearing, at least from my perspective, we kept hearing two different trains of thought as we went through this process. One is you can save money going to the self-insured program. But then you look at the numbers and it doesn't appear as though you're saving much money. So how does that process, somebody needs to help break that down and explain it to us. How long will that take? An expert? Hopefully not too long. And I mean, unless that person, I think everyone here has the ability to understand it. If somebody were to break it down and say, okay, this is why it appears you're gonna be, paying more money with a self-insured plan than you really are, that kind of stuff. I couldn't imagine, now this is just me speaking, but anything over $10,000 would be, I mean, I just, how long would it take, I guess is what I'm thinking, for someone to come in. Now, that's on the front end, but to help, craft RFPs, I guess it depends on, how deep you're gonna engage them. For me, I think we just need some education, but if we're gonna do RFPs and have them kind of in the shadows all through the whole process, which we probably need, but we can't afford, then, I think it's gonna get kind of costly. But for someone to come in with an unbiased approach and say, this is what self-insured does, this is how you save money, this is why it looks this way, and fully insured has these benefits, that kind of stuff. We had that through this whole process, but it was by, vendors who had a vested interest in,
Right.
polishing one side and kind of talking down the other. So, but I wasn't aware of the timetable issue, which makes sense. But if there's no money in the budget, then I think that pretty well, I mean, that settles the whole discussion.
I'm not gonna say there's no money in the budget. Monday, we're gonna take more pencil to paper and see what we can do here to pay for that there, and that's what we're gonna be doing. So, and if you're happy with that number, you're the one that put out a number. You think that
Because if somebody educates us on self-insurance, they ought to also give us a plan on how we go about self-insuring and then walk us down the path. It seems so chopped up to just pay for education. And then, well, now we know, but we don't know.
what to do with it, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's where the administrator.
So
for
it
the
seems
self-insured
like
comes
there
in.
needs to be an RFP with benchmarks. First educate us, and evaluate our position, and then help us.
Okay, Mr. Bates, I'll be with you in just a minute from Florida Blue. Mr. Tompkins?
Well, listen to all this and what we went through last year. We struggled with the fully insured, trying to understand all the nuances of that between all the providers that submitted to us. I talked to several people on the evaluation committee of that. They honestly didn't have a clue to what they were evaluating. It was Greek to them. So I think we need somebody that's going to help us with fully insured, that we know what we're getting, where we're going with that, and analyze it against self-insured. And if it costs $30,000 or $10,000 or $15,000, we're gonna have to get an insurance person on board with us, because we can't go through what we went through last 2 years. We need to start now, have somebody on board, and if we only need them for 3 months, great. But we can't sit here and keep kicking this can down the road and be in this position again this time next year.
Well, I don't think we kicked the can last year. I think we really worked hard, and we did see a rate decrease by doing what we did. But you're right. Now it's a full new year, it's a brand-new board, and we're moving forward at this point. Mr. Bates, you had your hand up. If you'll come up to the microphone, please.
name is Ben Bates, 3400 Krill Avenue. I didn't intend on saying anything, but I'm here as a citizen, not as an insurance agent, but I do know what's going on, not representing Florida Blue or any carrier. You're talking about a consultant. You know that you have the #1 consultant that would be happy to come down and explain everything that you would like to find about the insurance program. That's Wakely Consultants. They're the ones that started it. You got the 11-page document. You can check anybody in the industry and they will tell you that they are the #1 consultant in the insurance industry across the United States. That is provided to you independently and would be happy to set a committee up at your convenience and try to get them to come in and make a presentation and answer any questions that you may have about that so you can have a better understanding on how to move forward. And that's just an offer.
Thank you.
Can I ask you, now, they would still be expected to be paid, correct?
Pardon?
They would still be expected to be paid, wouldn't they?
That's taken care of.
Well,
My agency provided
but
that
your
as a
agency isn't our
consultant.
agent.
Pardon?
We contract with Florida Blue, so would Florida Blue send Wakely down to help us with that?
I said there would be no charge to the county to do that.
But
Now,
I appreciate that. Don't think we don't, but does that
That-
meet our purchasing requirements? And
We're not purchasing anything. But the board makes the final decision on whether you want to procure something.
Right.
Or whether you want to accept free advice. I mean, that's.
this is information only.
I
hear
You
you.
want information, and I'm offering you the information.
And information is good, and I would not turn it down, but you guys also want guidance. And if you're asking for guidance, I think you have to pay for guidance, and if you're paying for guidance, you have to procure it using our purchasing
that's what
policies.
that's what
Yeah.
I was trying to get to, yeah. Now, we have the Wakely report, and we all read that report. So but thank you.
There's a lot more
Yeah,
involved than
but
just
yeah,
that
but I
report.
think, as been saying, that if they're offering to actually have staff come down, professionals, that's a little different than just reading a report,
It's welcome.
you know, so I definitely think
Yeah,
we need to,
yeah.
we need to pursue,
I
we
think
need to
we'd
pursue
welcome
that.
anybody to come down
Yeah.
at that point.
Because I don't want to get too far away from here. I think one of the issues was the amount of money. So I think we ought to put the amount out there, whether we use it or not, but we ought to put that amount out there. We definitely would like to go for the free way, but I think we should put something out there so that we do have it. We can always not use it, which is my choice, but.
You don't want to,
No, it was a smart aleck
Oh.
remark that went through my mind. I don't need to say it.
okay.
It was funny, as all it was.
That's okay. Okay. No, I think a placeholder number was always, if we're going to be looking at that, and I agree. So what are we comfortable with, folks? We're going to make a recommendation to the board of a number. So what are we comfortable with? I mean, it's a shot in the dark.
30,000 because
You guys don't even have to come up with a number. I mean, that can be something that we decide Monday.
Okay,
okay.
okay. But we want a placeholder number.
I'll
We're all
put it
gonna-
on the list.
Okay, all right. Okay, Marjorie, the next meeting on the agenda, is there any, the next meeting will be, we want to keep these going pretty quick.
When would y'all like the next one to be?
I'd say within a month.
Mr. Suggs starts
Say
with us on the
September 25th. Doesn't he start the 24th?
No, wait a minute. Mr. Suggs starts the 25th. It should be, what's that week? What do we have on that date?
I'm
What-
pulling it
We
up.
have legislative delegation on the 25th. We've got,
What about like that Wednesday or Thursday?
looks
We
like
have a meeting.
We have Logic on Wednesday. Thursday's open, as far as I know.
What's the date on Thursday?
The
28th.
Let's, is that okay with everybody? Because then our new administrator will be here and we can hit the ground pretty much running. So let's look at 9/28 at 1:30. Is that good with everybody?
Commissioner too.
Everybody back from lunch
Might
and
have a
ready?
new commissioner too, so that's true.
I'm sorry?
I said you might possibly have a new commissioner by then also, so.
Well, that's what I'm hearing, but let me check my calendar. Something seemed to be a miss there.
It's right before the Bartram Frolic,
That's what I knew there was something in my
but
head.
that's not till Saturday.
I'm sorry?
The Frolic's not till Saturday.
Okay. Actually, Florida Association's accountings is Thursday. That's okay, we can still do it that day. Yeah, okay. I knew there was something going on. But let's do the 28th at 1:30. Is that good? All right. Any other business to come before the committee? Hearing none, this meeting will stand adjourned.